Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I don't know when everyone will get a chance to watch this, but I do want to just kind of go over things real quickly. Nothing, real large to go over this evening. Just wanted to kind of touch base and make sure that everyone has a good understanding of what's going on this week. So there are two packet tracer labs. There's 10.1.4 and 10.3.4. Those are just your standard packet tracer labs. And let's see, let me log in. Go ahead and log into the Cisco Academy and we'll take a look at those slides real quick. By the way, no one should be seeing this second course anymore. I'm pretty sure I got everybody removed from it, so all you should be seeing is this, our actual course, the 2021 Spring Term A. So let's see, going back to the assignment again, 10.1.4 and 10.3.4. So if we go into the course materials down here, and then chapter 10 is on basic router configuration. So this is where, we really start to get into some of the basic, nuts and bolts of router configuration. You've done a good bit with switches so far this term, so now you're going to be learning about routers. Remember, routers are layer 3 devices, unlike the layer 2 switches that we've been looking at. So the first lab is 10.1.4. So if we go to that slide here, this is just a lab on configuring initial router settings. Here's the link to the packet tracer file here at the bottom, and then PDF version of the lab here. I'll go ahead and open that up real quick. Essentially what you'll be doing is establishing a console connection to the R1 router, and it gives you step-by-step instructions there. You'll enter privileged mode on the router, which is the same as what you're used to from the switch. Next you'll take a look at the running config, which is just the default config, because obviously at this point you've not made any changes to it. It'll ask you some investigative questions where you can kind of look and see the interfaces that are on the router, and you can see that through the show running config. Of course, you'll learn later on that there are other commands that you could use for that as well. Then you'll take a look at the startup config, which at this point is, as it says, is not present, but essentially it's the same as the running config because there is no differences, no changes have been made. And then you'll get into some basic configuration. You'll see that configuring passwords on the device is the same as configuring them on a switch. Then you'll go through this step here where you'll verify some of the initial settings. Then you'll learn how to save the running config. Basically, you'll look at different things there. You'll talk about flash memory, and I think you'll probably, the startup config. One of the things that you already know from switches is, to use the copy run start command to copy the running config to the startup config, and that's pretty much it. So this lab is very basic, rather quick. Just not much to it. And then the next lab, let's see, where is it? 10.3.4. That will be a little more in depth, and you'll actually do a little more with this lab. Just taking a look at it real quick. Basically, kind of the same things to start out. You'll do some of the same basic, configure and investigative stuff, and then it'll move you on through but we're not even seeing the topology here in this document. We'd have to go into Packet Tracer to see the topology. Or actually, I may have it up in another document. Let's see, 10.3.5. No, 10.3.4, right? No, that's 10.3.5. Okay, yeah, actually, I don't have that one up. I have this one up for some reason, but and let's see. Oh, 10.3.4. That's right. Yeah, so it is this one. It's this one up here. I'm sorry, not 10.3.5. You can do this 10.3.5 if you have time and want to do it. This will be some extra practice with this stuff, but 10.3.4 is actually the one that's assigned. And let's see. Yeah, the document that I have here doesn't have the topology either. We'd have to go into Packet Tracer and open that up, and we'll just do that real quick, just to kind of see what the topology is here. Refresh my memory on this lab. Notice that third window popped up again. That seems to be becoming more common here lately. I don't know why, but so you got to cancel that. So here's the topology. Essentially, you've got two routers. So one of the first things you want to recognize when you're looking at this is how many networks are there actually here. And you can tell that because by just looking at the different router interfaces. Remember, routers are layer 3 devices. So if a router interface is in use, then that has to be a separate network from a different router interface that might be in use. So if we look at R1, R1 has 3 networks connected, right? It has this 192.168.11.0/24 network, has the 10.0/24 network, but then it also has the point-to-point network, which is just the point-to-point connection between the two routers. But here you can see the IP addressing that's used here. Notice it's /30, not /24. So this is using a .252 subnet mask, whereas these are using a standard Class C, 255.255.255.0. Same with these over here. Basically, this is kind of like a mirror image of this one, but we've got different subnets, 10.1.1, 10.1.2, but they're both /24, so they're standard Class C. So all total here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different networks. So that's one of the first things that you should recognize here. Of course, this window has our lab instructions. It gives you all the IP addressing information and then step-by-step instructions on how to complete the configurations. I don't believe they have you consoling in this instance. I think you're able to just click on the routers, go to the command line, yeah, and once you're in there, click on it, hit enter, and it'll prompt you for, well, either they gave you a password or in the instructions, and I'm not going to take the time to look at that, but either they gave you a password or they're going to have you console in. I think it's just that they gave you a password in here. But again, just follow step by step through the lab instructions and you'll understand what to do. One of the first configuration items that they have you do is to configure an IP address on one of the gigabit Ethernet interfaces. One of the things you'll learn about interfaces on routers, they are by default shut down. You have to use the no shutdown command to bring it up. The next step, they'll actually have you pinging one of the end devices, one of the PCs, and you should get a successful response there according to what the instructions are telling us. So again, just continue on through. This lab itself is not very long. This is already the end of it here, so there's not a ton, but a lot of very important basic IP addressing configuration on a router that you need to learn and understand. So be sure to take your time to go over that. I'm going to go ahead and close this. The only other lab that you have this week, and I want to point this out, is 10.4.4. This is one that you have to build out yourself. This is a lab that in most semesters we would have done in NetLab, but we don't have access to NetLab this term, so you're going to build this lab out in Packet Tracer. So let's take a look at that real quick. 10.4.4. Okay, so up top here is your topology. So this is what you're going to do. Essentially, you're just going to open up Packet Tracer on your computer. Once it opens up, and I'm just going to kind of minimize it here so we can see the part of the topology here. So we've got a PC and a switch, so we can come down to the end devices, grab us a PC, go down to network devices and switches, and grab us a 2960 and pull it up. Next, we have a router and then another PC. So we'll go to the routers. Don't know if it gives us a specific model. We normally, in almost all labs, can use the 1941 router, so that should work fine. Sometimes in the labs they'll tell you a specific model, and if Packet Tracer happens to have that model, great. If not, then just do the closest model that you can. And then another PC. Okay, so that's our topology. Now we've got to cable it though, right? So let's take a look at that. Our first connection is a PC to a switch. That is a standard, a normal connection, right? So we're just going to use a regular patch cable. So we'll connect it to the NIC on the PC. And I forgot to look, where are we connecting on the switch? What does it say? Fast Ethernet 6. Okay, so we're connecting to Fast Ethernet 6. Okay, and then let's see, on Fast Ethernet 5 of the switch, it's connected to the gig 1 on the router. Again, this is a standard connection. It's normal to have a switch connected to a router, so we're just using a straight through cable. So we'll go down and pick the cable, and it was Fast Ethernet 5 and gig 1 on the router. So that's this one. Notice how router interfaces are numbered. The first interface is always 0. The second interface is 1, and I'm pretty sure it told us to use 1, right? Yep, it did. So gigabit interface 00 is connected to the PC. Now here's where you gotta think about it. A router to a switch is not a normal connection. Normally there's a switch in between. So for this connection, we've got to use a crossover cable, and that's this cable right here. Notice it says crossover. So we're connecting to gigabit 0 and then the NIC on the PC. Okay, so notice you can still tell that's a crossover cable. So this is how you'll set up your lab. So this is, kind of simulating real world. If you were in a classroom, a traditional classroom lab environment, you would be connecting these cables to these devices. So Packet Tracer's kind of having you walk through those steps, to do that, again, just like you would in the real world. Once you've got your configuration set up there, then you can just proceed with the lab and complete all the configuration requirements on all the devices that are in the lab. And so that's it for this week. So what you'll be submitting is your Word document with screenshots of the assessment items tab from these two Packet Tracer labs, and then you'll be submitting your completed Packet Tracer lab for all three of the labs, for 10.1.4, 10.3.4, and 10.4.4. Of course, there is no, as you know by now, there is no assessment items tab on this one because you are creating this one yourself. So it's not a traditional packet tracer activity. It's not a PKA file. It's a PKT file. So so you have those 3 packet tracer files to submit, and your Word document will include screenshots from these 2, and that's it. So not a ton this week. I would suggest though that you look ahead to next week, maybe if you get time, because I think next week's assignment is a little more intensive. Yeah, a little bit. A few more labs to do. Nothing terrible though. But anyway, if you get time this week, you might want to kind of look ahead at that. But anyway, I think that is about it. I did want to mention again, I think I posted an announcement on this, but most everyone did very well in week 2 and submitting their assignment. Much improved over week 1, and boy, does it make a difference. I mean, it makes a difference in your grades because you have everything submitted that you're needing to submit. But then, I appreciate it as well because of my time. It probably took me 5 times as long to grade week 1 as it did week 2 because most everybody had everything in order. It was everything just was done correctly. So that was great. So anyway, I think that's it. So I know we've only used up about 25 minutes here. I know we do have one student on the call, but I know he has other things going on, so I don't know that that he is able to jump in if he has any questions. But I'll kind of.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm still on hold, so but it's fine. I don't mind saying it public. I can message it to you. Okay. So what's the word count minimum on the discussion post?
Typically, what I'm looking for is about 150. 150 words. Some classes, and this is one thing I don't particularly like about how a lot of the IT courses are set up. The discussion assignments, in my opinion, should tell you exactly what is being looked for. And for some reason, they're not putting in that kind of information. But personally, I look for 150 words, and I kind of when I do the grading for week 1, I point that out to anyone whose post was short. I'll let them know that I'm looking for about 150 words minimum. Some of the other courses outside of our department, you'll see that they look for more in the neighborhood of 250 words on the initial post. I'm not, our discussion is important. I don't want to slide it in any way, but the hands-on portion of an IT course like this is more important. So, it's more important that you learn about configuring and, routers and switches, and the discussion's part of that. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not, wanting you to spend, anywhere near the amount of time on the discussions that you are on the labs each week. So that's why I typically look for just about 150 words.
An opinion, and it's more specific to me, so I don't think anyone can glean any insights out of this. As someone who's new getting into the IT industry, because I'm really no experience, but I have a job doing tech support right now with a pretty big company.
Uh-huh.
Trajectory-wise, I'm set to graduate in like 2 years. What would be a natural progression as far as like going from just entry-level tech support to like, what would you say trajectory-wise 2 years? I come out with my bachelor's in science and information technology. What would be a role I could step into at that point in time if I'm looking,
Yeah, well, that's going to kind of vary. I think I can be a little more specific with you since you have been specific with where you're at. But it can still vary depending on the company you're working for, whether you stay with them, whether you move on. That's one thing about the IT field. It's not uncommon for people to move around a good bit, and I guess that's becoming more true in a lot of fields these days. It didn't used to be the case. It used to be that IT was kind of the exception. But one of the reasons that people in the IT field tend to move around a lot is to get exposure to different technologies. But at the same time, when you find a good place to work for, you want to work within that. So so partially it can depend on where you're working at, what kind of roles they have within the IT department. But typically, someone who's first starting out in the field, they're going to start out in either a hardware support type position where, it's just kind of hardware break fix stuff. You're replacing hard drives or motherboards or that kind of thing. Or the other typical entry level position is a help desk position where a lot of times you're answering phone calls or instant messaging through whatever instant messaging app the company uses. And in that kind of role, typically you're either, a lot of times you're working off of pre-prepared scripts for specific, scenarios. And scripts as in not computer scripts, but as in verbal scripts to and how you address different problems with different customers. And but then you may also have specific programs or maybe small IT scripts that perform various tasks that you're running while working at the help desk. Like, for instance, if somebody forgot their Windows password, you might, as a help desk person, you may or may not have access to Active Directory users and computers. You may just have access to a script that you can run to reset that password, for that user or something. So a lot of times that's where you're starting is in those kind of roles. I guess those roles are very straightforward. Pretty much whether you're on the hardware side or the software side, when you're approaching a problem, you usually already have a prescribed fix to it. So it's not a scenario a lot of times where you have to do much in the way of troubleshooting, unless it happens to turn out to be a new problem that's not been run across or something. But a lot of times with hardware break fix, going in, you may have to do a little troubleshooting to see is it the power supply, is it the motherboard, that kind of thing. But you generally go in knowing you're going to have to replace one or the other. Same thing with help desk type positions. From there, typically, you can move into more of a desktop support type position. Again, this is going to vary from company to company, depending on how they're structured. But desktop support is just a little more advanced. Maybe in larger companies, it may just be like a level 2 help desk or something. In some companies, it may be a traditional desktop support where you're actually getting hands-on with clients and their computers. There's probably less of that these days right now with COVID, but typically that would kind of be the next step. Then from there, it would depend on kind of which direction you wanted to go into. If you're looking to or it may just depend on what opportunity presents itself. But if you're looking to go into more of the server side of things, then you might go from desktop support to a systems admin, where you would, at that point, be in a role where you're dealing more with managing servers. Or you may choose to go in the other direction if the opportunity presents itself and get into the networking side of things, where you could possibly step into a network technician type role, which is kind of like an entry level network position. and then you can grow from there into more of a network admin position, and and then it can kind of take off from there. If you're in the field long enough and you continue to grow and develop, um, most network admins, most network admin positions are going to require at least a CCNA. Some are going to require CCNP. Of course, here at Herzing, we cover in IS 285, IS 287, and then I don't know what the third course number is. They keep changing it, and the course hasn't even been offered yet. But there are 3 courses that cover the 3 Cisco Academy courses under the CCNA certification. So if you're wanting to get into the networking side of things, that's the direction you want to to look as far as certifications is your CCNA. Well, first of all, would be like the Network Plus, and then once you get past those basic certifications like A Plus, Network Plus, those sorts of things, then you would be looking at the CCNA, and then if you advance beyond that, possibly the CCNP. On the server side, you would be looking more at Microsoft certifications, like the MCSA certification, which is focused on server technologies. So you have a couple of options, especially with this degree track. As far as maybe going server side or networking side. And you'll just kind of have to, as you get more experience, you'll have to decide which of those is more attractive to you. A lot of times you go in either one direction or another, but sometimes you find yourself in positions where you're dealing with both, to some extent at least. And actually that has been all of my experience. I have never been in a role where that I was only responsible for the server side or only responsible for the networking side. I've always had roles where I did it all. And to different extents. So it can vary, and largely it just depends on the size of the companies that you're working for. But in smaller networks, it's more likely that you're going to find yourself doing both server admin stuff and network admin stuff. And so as time goes on and you learn more, you get more certifications, you can advance up into positions that involve that sort of thing. My previous job title was network administrator, and while I guess the networking side was a big part of my job, the server side was just as much. So sometimes job titles, don't aren't completely accurate with the actual job functions. In that position, I was responsible for the entire server infrastructure in the organization, as well as the networking infrastructure, which included, not just layer 2 devices, but also layer 3, as we had multiple WAN connections, some more traditional WAN connections, and then we started, before I left there, we started moving toward Metro Ethernet, and so I managed a good bit on that side as well. So it varies tremendously across the field. Again, I think a lot of times it's a combination of what interests you and what opportunities kind of come your way.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate feedback. I'm sorry, I didn't know still recording. Not we were just talking casual or not.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's what I'm here for. So I'm glad to answer questions like that. I know we have, oftentimes I have students like yourself who are, maybe haven't been in the field too long, and then sometimes we have students that aren't in the field yet. Breaking into the field can be quite a challenge, because when you're looking at various supposedly entry level positions, a lot of times they want you to have a couple of years experience. So so it can be a challenging field to break into. So you are at you have a very good advantage right now in that you are in the field and working in the field. And at this point, like I say, it's just a matter of you kind of figuring out over time, what it is you enjoy the most and which direction you want to go in. And maybe you really like the company you're working for now. And if that's the case, then you may kind of cater things more to how it's laid out at the company you work for. So in other words, you may, your actual direction in IT may be driven by that a little bit, or if you're not particularly attached to the company you're at, or some point down the line you decide that you'd like to look for other opportunities, then you can always kind of focus on the areas that really interest you. And every new opportunity is going to be a learning opportunity, because every place, as you move, if you go from company to company or organization to organization, because everybody's using some of the same, but always some different technologies. So as you move around, you get introduced to different things. And of course, a lot of people these days work for contract companies, where you're, the company has contracted with other companies to provide IT services. And so you're going into potentially multiple companies, multiple offices a day to do work, or remoting into multiple offices depending on, the situation. But
I don't want to keep up much of your time, so let me know if your cat for board or not and everything. But I'm just I'm picking your brain. I picked my other IT professor's brain as well too.
Yeah. And that's company like that's great to do. That's great to do, because all of us have different experiences. So my personal experience in the IT field could be way different from someone else's, especially someone that's more on the programming side of things. I mean, I know personally, I know a little bit about programming. I know a little C++, a little Python, but I don't do much of that kind of thing. That's just not my area. Never has been. I guess if anything, I do more PowerShell scripting. But yeah, that's definitely great to because you're going to get different opinions and different points of view from other instructors. So that's great.
And you make a, I would say substantial, but I'd say a decent living with just support, like general basic troubleshooting, like, the type of dummy questions that, it may be irritating to others, but to, if you're like, you don't want a frills type of position, is that something where you can make, over 70, over 80,000, doing that? Or is that the entry level stuff kind of like, you can't really move up so many levels, but resetting someone's password or helping someone access their access code or something like that?
Yeah, I would say the latter there is true. And of course it varies, widely across the country, from region to region. But for the most part, with entry level positions like hardware support, help desk, or even up into more of a desktop support type position, you're probably looking at, for the most part, and you will find exceptions, but for the most part, you're probably looking at under 40 a year in those type positions. So in order to get into the area that you're talking about money wise, you've got to get more into like a systems admin or network admin type position. And you'll even see some of those out there that pay in the mid 40s to mid 50s range, again depending on what part of the country you're in. Obviously, Columbia, South Carolina is going to be a world of difference compared to San Francisco, California. So you kind of got to take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt. It's going to depend on the region you're living in, but pretty much getting into that income range you're talking about, you're going to have to get into a systems admin, network admin kind of role where you're responsible for at least some part of a server infrastructure, and depending on how large the company is, if it's a real small company, you may be responsible for the entire server infrastructure. If it's a larger company, you may just be responsible for email servers or whatever, just a specific group of servers or something. In those type of positions, you're not typically managing people. It's just you're responsible for some of the higher level systems, servers, switches, that sort of thing, depending on exactly what you're getting into. But so I think that probably answers your question. It's, you got to move up a little bit in order to get into that income range.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me clarity.
No problem. Okay, well, if you don't have anything else, I'll go ahead and stop the recording here and get it posted in the announcements section. I think this week the labs are pretty straightforward, fairly simple, but it's providing a foundation for future weeks. So you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of the basic router configuration that you're learning this week, and so that you can be pretty quick with it in future weeks, because you'll have not only that basic configuration, but in future weeks you'll have other stuff on top of that, some more advanced and potentially complicated configurations that we'll get into later in the course. So anything else? Did you have any other questions, or?
You mentioned the area, like that's where I want to move. So like when I graduate in 2 years, I want to work a year where I'm at, because I'm in Carolina region, and then working, hopefully get a better job with a bigger company that year, and then I want to get relocated to a job out San Diego, San Francisco. That's my goal. So
West Coast, yeah. Whole different, from an income standpoint, it's a whole different world out there. So just bear that in mind. And the biggest reason is housing is so much more expensive, especially if you get into a highly populated urban area like LA or San Francisco or something, and even San Diego. The housing is outrageously expensive. So keep that in mind. You're going to need more income in those areas, to be able to live the same level that you live on the East Coast. So making I don't know, personally, if I was looking to move into an area on the West Coast like that, I would probably be looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% more income than what I currently have. And I live on the kind of on the East Coast. I lived down in your area for actually I grew up in North Carolina and spent a lot of time there as an adult, but now I live in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and from a cost of living standpoint, it's fairly similar. And I could imagine just the little bit of time that I've spent on the West Coast, which isn't much, but just a little bit of traveling I've done there. It's sticker shock if you're not familiar with those areas and haven't traveled there much.
I went to LA 2 years ago, and I'm planning on scouting San Diego, San Francisco this summer. It's 4 years ahead, but it doesn't hurt to get an idea. I'm gonna go up there for like a week.
Right.
Split it up 3 days between each city and just kind of like go around, look at property values, see what the earnings are out there. Just how to commute and everything. So I just know it's a lot of companies in both of those cities that are tech IT focused. So I'm like, that's where I'd want to relocate at eventually. So
yeah. Well, and some of that is starting to move. But it may be the that environment of the West Coast that is attractive to you. I know. The idea of having, temperatures in the 70s all the time and hardly any rain, that's attractive to a lot of people. But there are other areas of the country. Some parts of Texas are starting to become pretty hot for tech. I'm not as in touch with the North Carolina area as I used to be. Obviously, Charlotte and Raleigh are kind of the main hubs down there.
RTP, that's it. But I've lived here my whole life. I'm trying to get out.
Trying to get out, yeah.
Yeah. I could probably stay here, but there's like one of the companies I was trying to get on with before I heard it. They have their global headquarters here, but they also have headquarters in San Francisco. So I'm like, in the next 2 years, if I get a job with them, I can just transfer out to the San Francisco branch.
Right.
That would be the incentive. Like, hey, I graduated. I'm already working for you. I'm going to work for you another year here. But then a year from now, my ambition is to get transferred out to a role in San Francisco, saying, where you're based at. So that's kind of a pathway I'm looking at right now. About 2 years out, just get on with that company. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like you've got a good starting plan in place to kind of investigate all that. So, but yeah, from an IT perspective, kind of what I said is basically what you can expect. But everybody's experience is a little different, and it kind of just depends on the companies that you happen to end up working for. You can everybody's career path is a little different, but what I've said here this evening is kind of the average, I guess you could say, for the IT field.
It's so funny you posted this the last 10, 15 minutes. What the hell is this? How does this help with assessment? Like assignment 1, unit 4,
right?
Just cut off. Like you shouldn't. This is the DVD extras. Don't listen to this stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'll probably give a warning and let them know that we get off track a little bit, around the, I don't know, what was it, 25-30 minute mark or somewhere, but
something like that.
Yeah, so no biggie. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and stop the recording now, I think, and